Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport, that you guys will hear and see if you're watching live right now or on YouTube later in the episode for the first ever live game of Sheet or Sham, where you guys can play along with us. If you're watching live, this will be a lot of fun. But Omari, we got some housekeeping, man. We got a ton of reviews, ratings. We got people commenting on YouTube that is moving to Portugal. Shout out John Benson. Everybody watching and listening on YouTube now. Apple, guys, we got 190 ratings. Let's get that up to 200 very soon. 250 on Spotify. Keep dropping them there. But this first rating, and we'll get to all of them. We're not going to get to all 6 that we have right now that we haven't got to. We will eventually. We're going to do 3 today, Omari. This is from the great Hortoni, 43 from West Michigan. I love that everybody lets us know their age now. It says, keep up the great work. Along with Bun and Cardigan, you guys are required listening for diehard Pistons fans. I enjoy the deep dives and the more technical analysis you guys go into with the Pistons. Keep doing what you're doing. P.S. Bryce, don't you dare besmirch the tastiness that is a Korean barbecue. That was from Mike.
Bryce, I still can't believe you really got in here and tried to lie about that Korean barbecue. You know that was a religious experience for you. It was delicious.
I thought the food was good. I was upset that I had to cook my own food at this restaurant. And the bigger thing was I had no idea that's what I was getting into when we walked into said restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it goes. You can get it to your exact level of doneness. And it was like for Vegas, it was pretty cheap too. So they passed some of the labor onto the table, but it gives you a cool Instagram opportunity. So
I think at the end of the day, Omari, it was showing a little bit of lack of trust from me into your cooking ability and some of the other people that were eating with us I had just met. It was kind of an awkward scenario for eating supper with people you literally met 5 minutes ago.
It wasn't awkward for me because I trust my cooking ability. You have to.
And you knew everybody at the table
and I did know
for
everybody
years.
at the table too. Oh, yeah, I didn't know everybody at the table. But like with my hands cooking the food, everybody knew that they were in good shape, and it was a delicious meal. So that was just a learning experience for everybody. When Omari has the cooking utensils, everybody's going to be in good shape. So.
All right. This is from Only Toms. He says, these guys put in work every podcast. Thank you. I think it has detail, substance, and honesty. All of these reasons are why I listen to podcasts in the first place, and these fellas don't disappoint. From a 50-year-old following the Pistons since Isaiah. Again, Omari, I love that ever since we talked about this, everybody lets us know what age they are. So if you're waiting to give us a rating and review, at the very least, give us a 5-star and then just let us know where you live, where you're listening from, and your age.
Yeah, we love that. It was funny. We kind of made like an offhand joke. It's probably like 2 months ago now. And now like 80% of the reviews since are like, I'm this age, I'm that age, I'm checking in from here, which is cool. We like seeing who we're connecting with. So definitely keep that coming.
And the last one here for this week, again, we'll catch up with the rest over the next couple episodes. This is from D. Sure, best Pistons pod. And then he said, not really close, or he or she may have said. And then longtime Pistons fan since the Grant Hill days, living in California. I don't get to talk Pistons with people often, so I supplement that need with podcasts. I've listened to darn near every episode since the K draft. Appreciate that. And listened to almost all the Pistons pod. This one is by far the most objective, interesting, and informative one out there. Love the takes, energy, and professionalism. Keep up the good work, boys. Again, guys, we just want to shout you guys out. We appreciate this stuff so much. It truly means a lot to me, Wes, and I know Omari, it does to you as well.
No, 100%. I mean, it's really gratifying, whether it's at the LCA or on the road. People walk up. There's a guy in Los Angeles actually last year who walked up and was like, I'm in Los Angeles. Like, there's some Pistons fans in LA, but, I listen to you guys every Tuesday, and that kind of gives me my Pistons conversation fixed for the week, which is awesome. I mean, we just sit down and talk hoops once a week. We don't always think about who's listening and why and for what reasons. So, I mean, it means a lot. It means a lot. That's what we're here for, and we're going to keep it coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And John Benson, again, on the YouTube comment, says he's moving to Portugal. So safe travels with that. Hope everything runs smooth. But this episode, guys, to start, You guys submitted 27 trades to us on Twitter. We're at least gonna shout you out. And there was a couple others that were just questions, not even trades. So we'll at least shout out everybody. We've kind of condensed it a little bit. We'll try to talk as much as we can because we are gonna bring on Wes at the very end to play Sheet or Sham, which is gonna be a lot of fun for you guys that are watching live on YouTube with us today. So give us your thoughts in the YouTube comments as we go through this. Let us know what you think about these trades. We're going to start with what I called, Omari, as the PJ Washington section. And so we had 3 of these, one from G-Man, one from Latchy Arthur, and one from Love My Country, all involved bringing PJ Washington to Detroit. So, Omari, what are your thoughts on PJ Washington? And then I know you can see there on the outline as well some of these trades. We have a Burks and Hayes for PJ Washington. We have a Bagley and Hayes for PJ Washington. And then the 3-team one from Arthur is really the one that's interesting to me.
Yeah, I like PJ Washington as a player. I kind of describe him as a jack of all trades, master of none, right? Like he can score inside. He's got a decent 3-ball, a solid rebounder. He even moves the ball, somewhat well for a power forward. So, I mean, if you're just looking at a depth piece for the Pistons, I mean, I think he makes a lot of sense. I don't know, for the, like his salary or whatnot, if it would be quite worth it. But just as a player, I do think he fits Detroit.
So G-Man said 4 for 65. And I was actually listening to a podcast the other day that we're talking about some of the guys we're going to talk about. And they said it's closer to 4 for 80 for PJ Washington is probably what he's going to get. And I don't know what I think about that. What I do think, Omari, is if you sign and trade for PJ Washington 4 for 80 and you just gave Stu the contract you gave him, and then Duran's going to get the contract he gets eventually, to me, you better hope that those 3 guys are your big man rotation. I think it can be, but essentially you've invested the money you're going to want to invest into your front court with those 3 guys.
I think 480 is probably a bit rich for me for that reason. You have Isaiah Stewart. We know what he brings. You have Duran, who you would have to pay at some point. So maybe that PJ Washington contract ages pretty well as the CBA money continues to roll in and that cap goes up every year. But 480 for me still feels a little bit high. He's not like the best defender. Like he's fine, but I just got to look at his overall game, and he's a good player. Like I'm not, there's no disrespect at all. I just think for me personally, I think 465 would be a little bit more realistic for me. I don't think the Pistons need to make a big swing for that power forward spot right now. I think you can go into the season as is, maybe, make a trade for somebody more established or who you feel good about. PJ, I don't know if he's quite on that tier for me, so I would have to see that price come down a little bit.
Yeah, so he's averaged 16, 5, 2.5, and essentially 2 stocks on 44, 35, 73 shooting splits. He's a career 37% 3-point shooter on just under 5 attempts. On synergy, he's rated very good as a pick and roll man, which I thought was interesting. 69% on rolls to the rim. Stu was just 55% 2 years ago. He wasn't very good on catch and shoots this last season, but it was significantly worse of his career. 54% on layups in the half court. In comparison, Stu was 57%. And then the one that I kind of tried to compare a little bit, Omari, Grant Williams. He got 4 for 54, and the Celtics received 3 second-round picks in return. So that kind of gave me a gauge. And so that's where I'm with you, where 4 for 80, all of a sudden I'm like, okay, what kind of value are we getting for this? And then also, I think you're going to have to give the Hornets more than what the Celtics got. I mean, just because of where those teams are at in their not rebuilds. Obviously, the Celtics aren't rebuilding, but just where they're at with their organizations. So let me ask you about this trade. The PJ Washington and Josh Green to the Pistons, Tim Hardaway Jr. to the Hornets, and then Boyan to the Mavs. He does say you have to add picks where necessary. What do you think about that trade? I think the Hornets would want more than just that, but I mean, adding PJ Washington and Josh Green would be an interesting addition.
It would be. I actually like that trade for the Pistons to turn Boyan into essentially, 2 good young guys. Josh Green really began to find his rhythm last season, and we just talked about PJ. Both of those guys feel needs for this team. I like that trade. I think for the Hornets, just to get THJ and you're giving up PJ Washington, maybe that works. I mean, if they're not committed to Washington at all, then you get something for him. Obviously a good veteran. That could work. And then you have the Mavs getting Boyan, and of course he just is a plug and play, vet who could provide some shooting around Luka. Add picks where necessary. I don't know if any of these teams necessarily need to include picks. Maybe the Hornets could have, a second or 2. for their trouble, but this doesn't strike me as a trade where, I mean, certainly none of these teams need to give up first round picks to get this done. You could talk me into that. Especially if the shooting holds up for Josh Green. I think that's a trade that would work for Detroit.
Yeah, no, that's what's interesting there is now you're not getting Bojan just for one guy. You're getting two. I do think the Hornets would probably want a little bit more in that scenario, whether it's some second round picks, whatever it may be. Before we move on to the next section, just shout out to Sharon Dalton here. Says, Shay, 57 years old. I've been a fan of the Pistons since Zeke was drafted. Bryce, I miss your player breakdowns. Hope you do during the season. I'll do some on Twitter. I won't be over at DBB anymore. Some things have changed in life. Had some other opportunities. DBB was great to me, but just have to, consolidate my time a little bit. So let's go to the Tobias Harris section. We got 4 of these, Omari. One from our guy Kyle Metz, Sam Lin, K1, and Double A. Most of these are very intricate. I like Kyle's the best in terms of it has James Harden in there as well, but there's one that involves Dame and Harden. So we can kind of navigate this however we want. But in general, Omari, you and I have had this Tobias Harris conversation. Where are you at just in terms of adding him? And then we can kind of look into some of the specific details of these trades.
I mean, I think he would be a great fit as a 4. Obviously, can really shoot the ball. He can handle it a little bit. Defensively, he's solid. And you can play him, at the 3 or 4, I think, without too much issue. So just from a pure fit standpoint, I actually really love his fit with this Pistons team. Just as another guy who can go get a bucket. And we saw in Philly that he's probably more suited for like that third scoring role anyway, which, again, you look at this Pistons roster and that kind of works just with Ivy and Cade, obviously. And can't discount the possibility of Bojan coming back and having another just heater of a season shooting from 3. So I could get behind that. I mean, I like him as a player.
Okay, so here's my question. What would be your long-term play with this? Are you trying to re-sign Tobias Harris? So let's break down the contract real quick. $40 million expiring contract. And I just want to say Tobias Harris will have made $250 million playing basketball at the end of this contract. Would you look to be signing him long-term? Almost like whenever they traded for Bojan. He's 31 years old, so still has a couple good years. This guy's been really good, Omari. 16, 6, and 2 throughout his career on 48, 37, 83 shooting splits, 39% on catch and shoot threes last year. He's 6'7", 230, a little sturdier than what Bojan is, 3 years younger. My guess is Bojan would go out. I think he is going out in all of these trades. So is it bring in Tobias just for a year to hold things over, or would you then try to extend them for some lesser money in the $20 to $25 million a year range?
If I could get him to sign, like, let's say a 3-year, I would probably go up to $70 million and feel okay about that, because that averages out to like 23.3 a year. That's probably my limit, but I think if you can lock him down for that, like compared to the market, that's probably as good as it gets. And, I don't know if that's the sexiest deal, right? But I think just as far as just having just him as an asset, right? Not only is that expiring an asset, but if you can get him to return, for less money than that, which I'm sure his next contract would probably be less than what he's making now. I think short term and long term, that would make a lot of sense for the Pistons.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I just wonder where Tobias is at in his career. Is he willing to go to Detroit? He's made enough money, right? You would assume. $250 million seems like enough money. I'm not saying take a team-friendly deal like what Al Horford has done, which we'll actually talk about Al Horford a little bit later. But can you get him on? Our guy Camille says Harrison Barnes range 3 for 54. I mean, if you could trade for Tobias Harris and essentially only giving up Bojan, he fits better with the roster. You have Tobias, Stu, and Duren as your core big 3 guys down there. Not like your big 3, but your 3 bigs, I guess. I like that. I think that's a really good group of 3 guys that can all play together in different ways. So let me ask you about the trade specifically from Kyle. He says Tobias Harris to the Pistons, Harden to the Clippers. The Pistons would send out Marvin Bagley to the Wizards. The Wizards would also get Clippers. He said they needed that to make the money work. And then a bunch of stuff to the Sixers. Bojan, Norman Powell, Marcus Morris, Gallo, Clippers first-round pick, and a pick swap. And that's where it starts to make sense for the 76ers is you get a Marcus Morris to replace him at the 4. You get a bucket getter in Norman Powell. You get a bucket getter in Bojan. maybe this would make sense from the Sixers, because it's not always easy for us to do this, Omari, but we do have to try to at least look at it from the other team's side as well. So that one breaks down a little bit and makes a little bit sense to me. Obviously, James Harden, the big name, going to the Clippers in that one.
I agree. I like that trade overall. I wonder if the Clippers are giving up too much. And it's James Harden, so I don't know if you're really giving up too much if he's the player who could push you over the edge. But Boyan, Norm Powell are two really good rotation players.
Yep.
Giving up a first-round pick, which maybe depending on the protections or whatnot, it ends up not being that bad because they plan on still being one of the top teams in the West for at least the next 2 seasons. While you still have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and Pistons, you get Tobias. I don't really have too many issues with this trade, honestly. I think all 3 teams would at least think about it. The Wizards getting 2 second-round picks and Marvin Bagley the third. Maybe
just because.
Maybe they're like, well, we don't necessarily need to eat. How much is left in Bagley's deal? Like $26 billion. Like, do we need to eat that much salary? Just for 2 second-round picks. Maybe they're like, well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense for us. But for the Clippers, if you're convinced that Harden can get you over the hump, or maybe it's not even that, it's just he's the best player you can realistically trade for, which could end up being the case for them. And you're only giving up a first-round pick and a handful of rotation guys. That, I think that makes sense. This is a very sound trade from Kyle Metz here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you say, the Clippers, if they're going all in on Harden, they're probably going to overpay. You're right. Yeah. I mean, there's some quality role players, but it's not a ton of picks for the Clippers. It's just 1 first-round pick and then pick swaps and some seconds. But the Sixers for Harden and Tobias are getting Boyan, Norman Powell, and Marcus Morris can still play a little bit, plus some future. I don't know, like, cap-wise, where that leaves them in terms of space. The other one I wanted to mention real quick before we move on is from AA. So this is the Dame and Harden trade. So Harris and draft capital to the Pistons, Dame and Boyan to the Sixers, Harden to the Clippers, and then Norman Powell, Marcus Morris, Wiseman, Highland, plus draft capital to the Blazers. I will just say on that one, Omari, the Blazers better be getting a lot of draft capital in that one, because I don't know if any of those other guys are really enticing to them. So it would have to be a lot of draft capital, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think along with that, I don't know if the Pistons are getting Tobias out of that, I don't know how much more draft capital there is for them to get something else. I think the Pistons, probably in that deal, you just take Tobias and it's expiring, and I don't think the Pistons would need a pick to take on that salary. I mean, it's an expiring deal. He's a good player. I think that's totally fine. So I don't know if the Pistons need draft capital in that. Sixers, obviously, you get Dame and Boyan. So
that's a good deal.
They seem like the big winners in that trade. Harden to the Clippers again. For the Blazers to get Norm Powell, Morris Jr., James Wiseman, and Bones Highland, like, I just don't think that's enough. I think even if they get like 4, it would have to be in a range of like 4 first-round picks, I think, for them to say, okay, like, we could actually do this. I mean, Norm Powell is a good player. You have 3 other players who, you don't like, maybe they're rotation players because you're not a great team, but you don't know if those players could actually help you win in the future quite yet. So you're taking on some risk. And along with that, James Wiseman enters restricted free agency in a year. So maybe you just audition him for a year and that's part of the trade. But I mean, if you're the Blazers, you probably need 4 first-round picks to even think about that. So.
Yeah, and Norman Powell is a really good player, but I'm not sure he makes sense for the Blazers. He may actually help them win too much. Plus, they have some other guys at his position, Shaedon Sharpe, Anthony Simons. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure you could find a way to get minutes, but I don't know that you want him getting minutes and helping you win. So let's continue to move along, because you talked about, adding a 4-man, and you don't think it's quite as big a deal as maybe everybody does, but we got a bunch of those, Omari. So we're going to run through those right here. We're going to start off with old friend Jeremy Grant. This is from Richard Brooks. He says, can they trade for Jeremy Grant? And it's my understanding from Spall Track that they can't trade for Jeremy Grant until December 15th, or Jeremy Grant can't be traded till December 15th. And that's just so you guys know, he's going to be in the $30+ million cap hits, and he's going to be entering his early 30s. So that new deal, he's in the low to mid 30s. I don't think this year, but every year after this. So Richard Brooks had Boyan or Harris plus Marvin Bagley the third for Jeremy Grant. I'm not sure. We've talked about Jeremy Grant. That contract was a little more rich than what I wanted.
Yeah, so that's essentially just a salary dump for Portland, just to get off of that contract altogether. And yeah, the Pistons paying $30 million could be fine. I mean, we know what Jeremy Grant brings. We know he really fits this roster well. I think him and Duran could potentially be one of the better defensive front courts in the NBA if Duran continues the trajectory he's on. So there's a lot I like there. I mean, he had his best season shooting the ball last year. So now you pair him with Cade and Ivy, obviously a different team than the one he joined 3 years ago. But I think he fits. And I think if the goal is just to get the best power forward on the market, and obviously with Jeremy, there's just a lot less risk because you know exactly what you're getting. I think it does make sense. Like, look at that $30 million as he turns 30, and maybe that gives you some pause. So it's just, to what extent do you feel, and this is my metric for any trade, right? To what extent do you feel that this is a tradable asset, right? Like, let's say the rebuild is not going well, something catastrophic happened, like who knows? But let's just say the Pistons are like, okay, we need to dial back and reevaluate where we're at. Can you trade that Jeremy Grant contract for assets? If the answer is no, then you probably shouldn't do that trade. But I think that's the biggest if, just because these salaries have become so inflated, it becomes tough to project what fair is. I think after a certain amount of years, like I think that could be a tradable contract. 20 seemed like a lot 3 years ago, and now we know he was probably better than that contract when it's all said and done. So 30 from that sense does not strike me as a big overpay, but I'm not confident that I could flip that for assets, and it just wouldn't be another salary dump situation you're looking for in a couple of years.
All right, let's do one more before we go to break. This is from Greg. He says Alec Burks to the Clippers, Marcus Morris plus 2 second-round picks to the Pistons. Again, we got a lot of these where just trying to fill in a guy at the 4 to balance the roster a little bit. This would clean up the backcourt where we've talked about they have like 6 guys you would somewhat feel comfortable playing or think could play. So you get rid of Alec Burks, bring in Marcus Morris, and just real quick, Omari, Marcus essentially a spot-up guy with some solid catch-and-shoot three-point numbers, and he is on an expiring contract.
Yeah, I think Burks had a better season last year. I don't necessarily value second-round picks super highly. So to me, you're just swapping, a good player for a player who wasn't as good last season just for a positional reason. And I wouldn't get behind that. I mean, the Pistons aren't competing for a championship next year, so I wouldn't give up a better asset for, or a player like Burks who is coming off a really strong season. For Marcus Morris, who probably wouldn't play as many minutes. You get 2 second-round picks, so that does make it easier. Maybe it's a deadline deal. You're just like, let's just get something. Maybe in February, that makes more sense. But if I'm looking at this offseason, I would just keep Alec Burks.
The only thing I will say about second-round picks, it's going to be real interesting. We saw the Nuggets do that this draft, Omari, is some of these teams that are going to end up in the super tax or whatever you want to call it under the new CBA, they're going to value these second-round picks because that's going to be essentially the only way they can add to their rosters, and that's what we saw the Nuggets do. They went out and took 1 pick, turned it into 3, and because they knew they couldn't make any moves in free agency. So having extra second-round picks, maybe as a team like the Pistons, you could sell those off and get something in return from these contenders, or the Clippers may not be willing to part with them. But we got to go to a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk Robert Covington, Otto Porter, Thaddeus Young, Christian Wood. We had a Karl Anthony Town one. We're going to get into some really fun ones, Omari, but we got to take a short break before we dive into those.
All right, we are back with segment 2. And I mean, it's not really surprising that we have a lot of trades here for power forwards, right? Like that's clearly the one positional need on this roster. So we're going to dive into one here from Corey Jump. It's just a straight deal for 2 players. Marvin Bagley III straight up for Robert Covington, who is with the Clippers. And, the idea there is just that he's somebody who could give you some defense. He's had some good season shooting the ball. And he's on an expiring. So, financially, maybe that's better for Detroit moving forward.
Yeah, 73% of his minutes last year, according to Basketball Reference, were at the 4. So a guy that can slide in there and play that obviously can play some 3 as well. I mean, I get it. I understand this, Omari. If you don't think that there's even minutes for Marvin Bagley III to play. Now, I don't know the Clippers roster well enough to know if he makes sense for them. Is he going to go there and actually play some minutes for them? In general, I don't hate this idea. I mean, we got it for a few different guys. We saw it there. The next one, this is from Pumped About Pistons. Malachi Flynn plus Porter, Young, 2 second-round picks to the Pistons, Marvin Bagley and Hayes to the Raptors. It's the same idea, right? You get Otto Porter, you get Thaddeus Young, low money and expiring contracts. I actually really like Malachi Flynn. I don't know where the minutes would come with this team, but I would love to have him on Detroit. But it's the same idea with both of those trades of you're kind of getting veteran 4 men that can come in, play minutes there, and they're still on expiring contracts. So how important, I guess, do you, because that really determines these trades make sense if you think that's a real hole. But if you think Bojan can play the 4 or Isaiah Livers, I don't think it's something where you just have to sell off Marvin Bagley or Killian Hayes to make it happen.
No, I don't think so. And I think also for Toronto, they're probably getting the worst end of that deal. Otto Porter's had injury issues, but otherwise he's probably the best player in that deal, just from a production standpoint. And I think if he's healthy, and that's a big if, but he would fit Detroit really well. But if I'm the Raptors, am I giving up 2 seconds plus Malachi Flynn plus Thaddeus Young just to get off of that contract? And I'm not sure if I'm quite there. You get Marvin Bagley the third and Killian Hayes back. To me, I feel like Toronto would probably just continue to survey their options. But if the Pistons could do that, it depends on the medicals for Otto Porter. So that's a big if, but you could talk me into that.
We'll talk about another guy the medicals are important with a little bit later. These next two are from Ronan Sports Talk. He says Bojan for Christian Wood plus a first-round pick and a sign-and trade. I'll just say with Christian Wood, I know he's talented. I know he's a really good basketball player. There's still a reason he hasn't been signed by anybody. I definitely wouldn't trade for Christian Wood. You probably could talk me into signing him, even though I probably would lean away from it. And then I like, man, Ronan went big. He said Bojan and Marvin Bagley III for Karl Anthony Towns. Again, big-time talent. He's a floor-spacing big. I think Omari would take way more than this to get Karl Anthony Towns. And you're talking about big contracts. His contract's going into the $50 and $60 million a year range. Yeah. I'm just not prepared to do that for pretty much anybody with where this roster's at right now.
Yeah. Looking at that first deal, Bojan for Christian Wood and a first round pick, Pistons aren't, I don't know. I don't think the Pistons would get a first round pick in that. Like, there's just no real reason for Dallas to, I don't even know if they have a first they could give up after the Kyrie deal, honestly. But, I think for them, it just doesn't make much sense to give up a first round pick for a guy that they could just not bring back, right? So, and then for the Pistons, they've had Christian Wood. Obviously, that was a different regime, different coach. But just the intel on him just throughout his career hasn't been that great. And just everything the Pistons talk about with character, maybe that exits him out. But hey, if you're just taking a fire on the guy, maybe that makes more sense. And then the second one, Bojan and Marvin Bagley the third for Cat. Yeah, if I'm Minnesota, there's just no way that I would do that. I would need Karl Anthony Towns is still a great basketball player. He hasn't had any playoff success. Of course, he was hurt last year, but I'm looking at that deal. If I'm giving up the best player, I've got to at least get some draft capital for that. And the Pistons can't trade a pick until I believe 2029. So. I would just need a little bit more. Well, I'll need a lot more, to be honest, if I were Minnesota.
All right, this is from Judah, and he says Marvin Bagley III plus Joe Harris to the Bulls, Lonzo Ball, Pat Williams, and a protected first-round pick to the Pistons. I don't think you're getting Pat Will and a protected first-round pick, but maybe in the season, maybe this somehow happens. Maybe they eventually want to get off Lonzo. I don't know what exactly is going on with Lonzo's contract. I know he has 2 years left at $20 million with a player option. I don't know how it works with the injury stuff. I really like the idea of getting Pat Williams, I guess is what I'll say about this one, Omari. Spot up player, shot really good on catch and shoot 3-pointers this past year. Hasn't really been this do-it-all guy that he was supposed to be coming in. I don't think you're getting Pat Will for Marvin Bagley III and Joe Harris. But if you could arrange some sort of trade to get him, even if you had to take Lonzo Ball's contract back, I would be interested in that in general.
Yeah, Pat Will makes a lot of sense for the Pistons. I look at just the value on both sides, and the Bulls are giving up way too much. Lonzo, there's no telling where he's at as far as just being able to play basketball. Of course, his injury situation is horrifying. It's impossible to say if the Bulls will look to get off of that contract or if they'll just ride it out or get some sort of medical exception or what, right? There's not too many examples of young players having the type of injury issues that Lonzo has had. But Pat Will has had, he's been solid. He's been solid defensively. He shot the ball well. If you're the Pistons, I think if the Bulls are trying to get off of that Lonzo Ball contract and including Pat Will, that's as good as it gets. You're probably not going to get a first round pick along with that. And then for the Bulls, I assume it's just more of a salary thing because Joe Harris, of course, isn't expiring. But Marvin Bagley has another year on his deal. So I feel like Chicago probably just doesn't do that. For the Pistons, it probably makes more sense. But for Chicago, they're probably just giving up a lot, not getting as much back.
All right, this is from Chubbs, who was at the live show. So shout out Chubbs, who came out and to Hopcat and watched live with us and interacted, asked some questions. We got to hang out with him. So shout out Chubbs. I know you've been a big supporter for a while. We appreciate you. He says Marvin Bagley III and Joe Harris to the Celtics, Al Horford to the Pistons. And I think he said bring Al Horford home. I didn't know Al Horford went to high school in Michigan. So that was something I learned from this one. Again, I don't think this is enough for the Celtics to make this happen. I would love Al Horford. He's on an incredible contract, $10 million essentially for next 2 years. He's essentially just a spot up player, but he's really good at it. I just don't think that gets it done. But yeah, I mean, if you could get Al Horford, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, we know what Al Horford brings. Obviously, one of the better defensive bigs in the NBA, one of the better passers, and one of the better shooters. So he would greatly raise the floor for this team. Of course, just being a really good vet to have in the locker room as well. So I like that a lot for the Pistons. I think for the Celtics, obviously Joe Harris, is a really good shooter. With Bagley, you're just not getting just not only the shooting that Horford gives you, but that playoff savvy as well. So I mean, for the Pistons, absolutely. For the Celtics, they probably look at it and say probably need a little bit more for that.
All right, this is from Mr. Jiggles. He says, Boyan and Stu to the Knicks for Julius Randle. This one kind of caught my eye just enough because I actually think the value is decent, Omari. And I'll just say, Julius Randle's 3 more years on his contract in the mid to upper 20s. He's almost 29 years old. I wouldn't do it, but I thought about it because I do like Julius Randle, but I'm not sure he necessarily fits the roster extremely well. But I thought out of a lot of the trades we got, Omari, I thought the value on this one was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I like Julius Randle as a player, and I think especially with the new CBA, I think his contract is completely fine. Like he's probably underpaid now for a guy who got some MVP attention not too long ago, and it's very firmly one of the better power forwards in the NBA. I think for New York, Boyan and Stu are 2 good players, obviously, but you're trading a guy who is more like star level, essentially for 2 more role player level guys. So for New York, I guess I'm trying to wrap my mind around like what incentive they would have to make the deal. If it's just, maybe we just like,
I think Wes like RJ Barrett maybe had blown up at this point, by the trade deadline, and you just didn't feel like you needed whatever Julius Randle is at this point in his career, a number 2 or whatever. And so it's like, hey, we can go get a couple, Boyan a number 3, number 4, Stu a 3rd big, and those guys make more sense because we have the stars at the top.
Yeah, I think the Pistons would have to include a first for that to get across the finish line, like at the very least. Of course, some other stuff would have to happen for the Knicks to consider trading Randle. He did have a bounce-back season last year, so they're set up to do that probably isn't as strong. But I think if the Pistons, you got to include some draft capital to sweeten the pot for New York.
I did have an interesting, fun time talking, Asar, Julius Randle, Duren. I think, does Randle space the floor just enough? And then Asar and Duren can insulate him defensively. I still didn't love it. I like him as a player, but, is that a move you want to make at that point? But I thought it was interesting. It was fun to, kind of think about that one. This one is from V Prasad. He says, Kuzma to the Pistons, Hayes, Wiseman, 2 second-round picks to the Wizards. Kuzma's contract, really interesting. 28-year-old, decreasing contract. It actually gets below $20 million in the final year, Omari. Over 80% of his minutes have been over at the 4 the last 2 years. He's had good numbers, more play types as a pick-and-roll handler than what I would like, but he can knock down unguarded catch-and-shoot threes. He is an interesting player. I know not everybody thinks he's a winning player, but he's an interesting player.
I think so. I know Monte Morris would love having this fellow Flint native and buddy here in Detroit. For the Wizards, that's just a salary dump. Hayes, Wiseman, both extension eligible, both set to enter restricted free agency next year. That trade couldn't get done. I think it's similar to Jeremy, but they would have to wait till after December to do that trade. So maybe the Wizards are just going to fully embrace a rebuild, and they say, okay, we can get 2 seconds for Kuzma, give Hayes and Wiseman some minutes to see if there's anything there. And if not, then obviously just part ways and just take that cap space next summer. So that's a solid trade. I mean, a lot of it comes down to the Wizards and their priorities and what they want to do cap-wise next season. And also how Kuzma plays as well, although at this point we know who he is as a player. I think it's fine. I think for Detroit, to essentially turn Hayes and Wiseman into Kuzma is just to say we're speeding this up, right? Like, we can't sit here and develop guys all season. So we're just going to get a guy who can come in and play and help make this playoff push. So I'm curious to see if that's the type of deal they'll look to do at the deadline, depending on where they are record-wise, the Pistons, that is.
All right, we got to get through the rest of these. These are the ones I say are just kind of random or spicy or just interesting in general. So we'll try to give some quick thoughts on these so we can get to Sheet or Sham. This first one is Zion to the Pistons, Boyan and 3 first-round picks to the Pelicans. This was from DRob0012. And I'll just say real quick, the only way this could happen in terms of 3 first-round picks from Detroit, they'd have to remove the protections on the pick to the Knicks that they currently owe and essentially just say, hey, we'll give you that in 2024. And then maybe they could do 26, 28, and 30. But as it stands right now, the only first-round pick the Pistons can trade is 2029 or 2030. And trying to decipher their second-round pick situation is a absolute nightmare. I'll just say real quick on Zion specifically, I would have to have incredible, impeccable medical information to just even start to think about this. I buy the talent. I got to know the medicals, and if I can't be 100% on those, I don't care what it would take, essentially.
Yeah, even if the Pistons had 3 first-round picks to trade, like I would probably pause on doing that. It would come down to the medicals. Of course, Zion with the lower body injuries, it's not a good track record for players his size having those types of injuries very early into his career. So that's the type of trade that could backfire really horrendously for Detroit. Obviously, if Zion can't play, you're basically repeating the Blake Griffin trade all over again and hamstringing yourself. So, yeah, I would have to see the medicals on that one for sure. And it's sort of it's like Zion, like the value for him is weird, right? Because everybody wants to see if he could play. And if he comes back and he dominates next season, then of course you would never think of trading him to begin with.
They're just going to keep him, yeah.
So I don't know if he's even a tradable player unless some team gets really, really desperate and just says, this is our only chance at a star, so let's just do it.
Yeah, I say that what you do is you just say, no, we're rolling in the lottery right here. Like we're taking a lottery ticket and we're going for it, and it's completely boom or bust. We got a couple about the Oklahoma City Thunder. So NBA trade season and Resball Pod, which is Steve. Shout out Steve. Always supports and has his own stuff that he's doing really big time. And they're essentially trades with the Thunder. And I just wanted to touch on these ones real quick because the Thunder have like 20 or 21 players on their roster, which is fine for right now, but eventually that has to get down to 15. Yeah. The Pistons are number 1 on the waiver. So my thought with anything that involves a Thunder player is I'm just going to wait and for them to cut or waive a player, and then I'll pick that player up. Now, Steve's did involve maybe getting a first-round pick as well, which we know the Thunder have plenty of. So that makes sense to me. But, there are some enticing players they may get rid of. Poku, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, Aaron Wiggins. There's some that Trey Mann. But I think I'll just wait and take my pick of the litter. And maybe this is why Troy Weaver only has 14 guys on the Pistons roster right now.
Yeah, I mean, if I could get Trey Mann, I've been a Trey Mann fan since he was drafted a couple years ago. So, I would definitely listen to that. NBA trade season, we have Marvin Bagley III, plus Killian Hayes to the Thunder for Davis Bertans, Poku, and Trey Mann coming back to Detroit. I think for Detroit, that's good value. Bertans obviously spaces the floor for you. Poku, we don't know what he is yet. He's putting on weight, they say. And, I just talked about Trey Mann, and then Bagley and Hayes for Detroit. That's basically just saying these guys are in our future plans. We can just take a flyer into every young guys and then have something that addresses our need for power forward. But as you said, for OKC or even for the Pistons, really, do you necessarily need to make that trade? It would have to be we really want Davis Bertans. We're just going to do this now and not wait for the waiver wire, which, makes some sense. So I think that's probably from Detroit saying a trade for Bertans, or maybe they value Poku that highly. I mean, I don't know, but I think it would have to be we value one of those two guys enough that we're not going to wait for the waiver wire. We're just going to go ahead and get this done now.
All right, this was a really interesting one from Greg. And essentially the trade, there's some other things that happen here, but essentially the trade is Jaden Ivey to the Timberwolves for Jaden McDaniels of the Timberwolves. So you're essentially swapping out Jaden Ivey for Jaden McDaniels. And so I thought there is other stuff that's coming. Poku, Garuba, the Thunder are involved. There's some second-round picks. But the core of the trade, you're sending Jaden Ivey out and you're bringing Jaden McDaniels in. And I'll just say, again, I was listening to a podcast. They were talking about Jaden McDaniels getting 4 years, $120 million. Obviously a big-time defender, Offensively, he's gotten a little better every year, shot the ball extremely well from three-point this last season, I think on low volume. I don't think I'm ready to give up on Jaden Ivey at this point. And my other thing is, hopefully you have someone in the similar mold with the Sar Thompson. So I'm not discounting how good Jaden McDaniels is, but I don't think this is something I'd particularly be interested in.
Yeah, I actually think Minnesota probably says no, just because Ivy, of course, overlaps pretty significantly with Anthony Edwards.
Sure.
And then on top of that, Jaden McDaniels is just, I mean, just to have a toolsy three who can give you that defensively is just incredibly valuable. And then, of course, for the Pistons, I mean, to trade Jaden after his rookie year, you risk, trading a future star, which could come back to bite you as well. And not that Jaden McDaniels can't get there, but he probably will be more of like that kind of toolsy elite role player than like a star guy. But we'll see. We'll see. He's still young, probably only like 21, right? So there's no telling what he could become in 3-4 years. I feel like that's one of those trades where both teams probably say no, because that could easily backfire one way or another for both teams. So they'd rather just keep the guys that they have. But that's an interesting idea, because I do think McDaniels will be really good for this Pistons team.
All right, 2324 Pistons. Casey Thomas on Twitter says Tyler Hero to the Pistons, Boyan and Hayes to the Heat. I would just say I think the only reason the Heat moved Tyler Hero is because to facilitate the Damian Lillard trade. And I don't know that Boyan and Hayes help facilitate the Damian Lillard trade, because I don't think the Blazers are interested in either of those guys. So I like Tyler Hero. I don't know how exactly he would fit with the Pistons. I don't think that's something Miami does in this case, just because the only reason they're trading Hero again is to make the Portland trade happen.
Yeah, if I'm Miami, I think Tyler Hero's contract is like perfectly fine, just for how well he shot and scored the ball last season. And I think him missing some of those key playoff games probably cooled the national opinion on him as a player. But you look at his numbers, and he's really, really good. I mean, if you're the Pistons, it's probably that's a good trade for Detroit. I like that a lot. But for Miami, yeah, Hero arguably is the best player in the deal when you also account for age. And anytime you have the best player in a deal, you just have to get some sort of draft capital back to even it out, which the Pistons probably shouldn't give a first-round pick for Tyler Hero. So that's probably one that both teams probably are cool on.
All right, I got two more that we're going to talk about. First, we got to talk about Wes's guy, Denny Avia. Kyle Metz put this one together just for Wes. So Denny Avia to the Pistons, James Wiseman and Killian Hayes to the Wizards. I'm going to say yes, 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 just because Wes is my guy and to make him smile.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Pistons, that's probably a yes. Denny Avia can play the floor for good passer. I think his shooting has improved even, so just a really good all-around forward. He can really, really pass the ball. Like, he's one of the better playmaking forwards in the NBA, I think. For the Wizards, you're getting James Wiseman and Killian Hayes, who I think both are less proven than Avia at this point. They probably need some sort of sweetener to make that happen, but they probably look at that trade and just say, I think we're okay. So sorry, Wes. Sorry, Wes.
Last one. This is from Age of Krabnos and NBA Mock Trades. And essentially both are trading Ben Simmons to the Detroit Pistons. I just want to give NBA Mock Trades a shout out. His was part of a bigger deal that involved 13 players, 6 picks, 4 teams, gets Damian Lillard to the Heat, Tyler Hero to the Blazers. I mean, he or she put a lot of time into that. Ben Simmons, 27 years old, 2 more years on his deal at 38 and 40 million. I'll just say this. I was really a Ben Simmons fan when things were going well for him. I think he was a really good player, Omari. Like, you just got to figure out whether he's ever going to play basketball again, and if it's ever going to be even close to the level we saw. If there is, then some of this stuff makes sense. If he's not, then it's kind of like the Zion thing. And the only way you know that is intel and those type of things. Like, we just don't know.
Yeah, I would not trade for Ben Simmons. I mean, if you're getting a 2025 first-round pick, maybe that makes it a lot easier. And
there you go.
The Ben Simmons decides to, play basketball again and be available. And then, you're getting obviously one of the better forwards in the NBA, for Boyan, Bagley, and Killian. So to get a first-round pick out of that too, probably sweetens the pot a lot for Detroit. But it's just, do you want to potentially eat that salary from Ben Simmons where he'll be on the books for $48 million, 38 and 40 over the next 2 years? Is that worth a first round pick from a Nets team that honestly could go one way or another over the next 2 years? I am not sure, but that's an interesting idea. But of course, it's like Zion, where a lot of it just comes down to which Ben Simmons are you getting, right? Are you getting a Ben Simmons who's engaged and will lift this team defensively and from a playmaking standpoint, or are you going to get a Ben Simmons who doesn't show up to camp? So tough to say. I don't know if I would eat that much salary or risk eating that much salary for one first-round pick.
All right, we got to go to a short break. When we come back, Wes is going to join us. We're going to play a live game of Sheed or Sham. So if you're watching right now in YouTube, get yourselves ready. But I want to give a few shout outs. Camille, I know you're here. I'm sorry, man, that we didn't get to your trade. We appreciate your support so much, but wanted to give you a shout out. We missed one from K1. We missed one from Sam Lynn. And then we had some questions from Ian and then Joel Feldman as well. You guys just asked some general questions. We may get to those in a later episode. And if we missed anybody else anywhere, we apologize. Like you said, we had, there's 30 different submissions on Twitter. We tried to get them all in here, but wanted to at least make sure we shouted everybody out. We appreciate you guys so much helping us out with this episode. So thank you. When we come back from this short break, Omari is going to introduce Wes, and we're going to have some fun playing Sheed or Sham.
All right. We are back with segment 3. Hi, Wes.
Hey guys, how are we doing? I mean, I'm here all the time, but hello.
Yeah, we're good.
Is this the first time you've been on a live at all?
I think this is. Yeah, I think this is actually the first for the YouTube streams.
Wow, we got to fix that. Okay.
Yeah, that's a major mistake on Omari and I's fault. Mostly Omari's, not mine. But
this mostly Bryce's fault. Wes, we have a connection, we have a partnership. So Wes, we're excited for this game of Sheed or Sham. Please remind the people of the record so that they know the stakes going into this.
Hold on. I gotta give shot your guy Shad, man. He says, I swear Bryce always has a big. I gotta stay hydrated. I'm getting old, man. When you get old, when you get my age, you understand dehydration it gets you more and more. So yes, I have a very big cup here. And that way I don't have to get as many refills. Sorry, Wes.
No, all good. All good. I was actually wondering too. So anyway, the housekeeping stuff. We got to give us all clear first. So Bryce, you've got 2 wins. Omari, you've got 4. Obviously, we know the rules, right? Sheed is true. Sham is false. But we got a little new twist since we're doing this live with the chat. So you guys get one time that you could kind of phone the chat. So if you're not sure, and you only get one of this per game, right? So if you're not sure, we can ask the comments and they can get you an answer. You could take it or not, but you could get help from the chat. So because of that, if both of you can get off of the comments tab in our stream here, that would be great.
It's on private
honor
chat.
system, but
mine is on private chat as well. So that way, if you're watching right now, you guys can play the whole time. Like right now, we still want you to give the answers. Wes has access to the chat. He can put your answers up on the screen and stuff like that after the fact or whatever. But if we phone the chat, then we'll go back and click on the comments. But mine is on private chat as well. Omari, keep your hands right where they're at.
Wow. Okay.
All right. Wow. So also the last game when we played, you guys actually tied. So this first question here is going to do double time. All right. So the first question decides a victory, but also counts for this one. So who wants it first? I'll let you guys pick.
I'll go first.
Who wants to be
I'll
first?
go first.
All right. Bryce, this is going to you. So the last pair of twins to be drafted in the same draft were the Morris twins, Marcus and Markieff, right? We talked about Marcus earlier in the episode. Both actually did eventually play for Detroit. The question is, Sheed or Sham, Marcus Morris was drafted first and was prioritized by the Suns in their original contract negotiations.
Sheed.
I'm going to go Sham.
It was Sheed. Or no, it was Sham. Sorry, I got it switched. Sorry. It was Sham. It was Markieff. Yeah, that's right. My bad. I read it wrong. Right. Yeah, Markieff was drafted, I think, 1 pick ahead. They both ended up at the Suns, and Markieff ends up taking less money so that he could still play with his brother, if I'm remembering this all correctly.
I will say just real quick, just because those guys played at KU, I'm pretty sure every one of their tattoos are identical. Like I know twins have a thing anyway. These two took it above and beyond. And I do think there's a story about them where one of them struggled without the other. Then they ended on the same team for a little bit. They played better, and both have had really good careers. But yeah, really interesting. So you're sure I lost that, right? Yeah.
Of course he's sure. Yeah, I'm up 5-2. That's the record. And my hands were up. See,
We're
Bryce,
gonna record in a gym someday so I can get some shots up or something and just win at something. I hate losing so much. All right, let's go. Next question.
All right. Mario, this one's for you. So Sheed or Sham, Jaden Ivey and Asar Thompson are the only number 5 overall picks to be drafted by the Pistons. So in other words, this is from Basketball Reference. The Pistons have only picked 5th twice.
I'm gonna go Sheed.
I'll go Sham on that.
It was Sheed.
Sorry.
It's true. Somehow I was shocked. I had to double check it.
Yeah.
Because number 5 picks ever?
According to Basketball Reference. Now, the only twist here is that it was only their original picks. So it is possible that there was a trade somewhere in there to get a 5th overall pick that I've missed. But according to Basketball Reference, yeah, they've only originally picked 5th 2 times, and it was Ivy and Asar.
Wait, am I already down 0-2? Did that first question count?
It did. Yeah.
Let's go. This is good. I knew that one only because like I think when it was like Cade, I was like going through like all their draft histories. Like last time they had a number 1, last time they had this or that. And they haven't had as many lottery picks as you would expect, like way more in recent years than like before. Because, of course, you got the Bad Boys era, and then they dabbled with the playoffs in the 90s. So there wasn't a lot, but it was a little bit of guesswork in that. But I was like, besides Ivy and Asar, like I couldn't think of anybody else who would even be, even just like the amount of like top 4 picks they've had or like top 5 picks are like, it's not like a really big number. So.
All right. Next one up. I was excited about this one since I found it. So, Bryce, this is going to you first. Former Piston, Jason Maxiell. And
Chat, get ready. Chat, get ready.
So, I only thought about him because obviously Woj noted he was the last Piston rookie. Well, not rookie, but to get the rookie scale extension, right? Before Stewart did. So, here's the question. Maxiell, he was known, he blocked some shots. He was just kind of a hustle guy. Fans liked him. They liked him so much that they gave him the following nickname, the Baby Eater.
All right, definitely go into the chat on this. This isn't even a fair question because Wes knows I wasn't even a Pistons fan until 2020, the very end of 2020. It hasn't even been 3 years. This is sabotage. So why are people cheering for Omari being up 2-0? That's messed up. I just looked in the chat and my man DJ is so I need some help. Come on, guys. Is this Sheed or Sham? Reread the question for the chat, Wes, and I'm going with whatever the chat tells me. So get me the answer, guys.
Sheed or Sham, Jason Maxiell's nickname when he was with the Pistons, at least amongst fans, was the Baby Eater.
They have to know. Somebody has to know this. And that's a really weird nickname. So if you just made this up and it's not true, we got to have a conversation after the episode. I'm not getting any answers.
Doing the psychoanalysis again here.
Yeah, well, Omari has me overthinking everything. Omari, do you know the answer? Like you're sitting there very calm and relaxed, showing your hands, which I appreciate because we know that you might Google stuff from time to time.
Never Googling anything. We have it live right here
for the chat.
I think there's a little bit of a lag between. I think there's a little bit of a lag between the YouTube and the comments here in StreamYard. So yeah, we'll let Omari give his answer, and then I'll give mine as the chat answers come in.
Wait, but you used the chat, so that means you have to go first.
You can't look at it anyway. I mean, I'm going to give my answer based on the chat regardless. All right, we're getting some in now. I'm going to say Sham. Based off the 3 that have come in so far, Apollo says Baby Shaq more like it. So yeah, I'm gonna say. Now there's a bunch of Sheeds coming in. Shad says Shad is. I don't trust Shad. That's Omari's boy, and so he's trying to cheat me. I'm gonna stay with Sham.
All right, Omari, what's your answer?
Like I'm trying to think. Like I watched the Pistons.
You've had plenty of time to think. What have you been doing?
I'm still thinking. I'm still trying to process this answer. Yeah, I mean, I've watched probably all of Jason Maxiell's games. If he was called the Baby Eater, it definitely didn't stick. But George and Greg have bounced nicknames around sometimes. I just didn't stick. I remember there was like a week where they
This
were
was a
calling.
fan nickname.
It
To
was a
be
fan
clear,
nickname.
this was
Okay.
not Georgia Greg. This was a
Okay.
fan.
Okay, because I was going to say there was like a week during Andre Drummond's rookie season where they were calling him Springs, and it just didn't quite catch. So I was like, maybe Jason Maxiell is in that same category. But I'm going to say, Bryce, you said Sham.
I did.
I'm just going to go Sheed just to mix it up. But I honestly don't know the answer to this. I'm just going to say Sheed.
So somehow it is Sheed. This is true. I don't know why. You can look it up. It's actually in Basketball Reference too, and there's an old DBP article mentioning the nickname after he left and went on to play for another team. So I don't know why it was a thing, but apparently he would block a shot, and then the only way fans could describe it was that he just ate a baby, and that's how he became the baby eater.
I'm doing the Birdman hand right.
Jason Maxiell.
3-0.
Hey, speaking of Birdman, speaking of Birdman, Omari, I know we've told this story, but last year at Vegas, we rode the elevator with him. Remember that? We were trying to find the Pistons practice facility, and we ended up in an elevator with Birdman and what must have been his manager or guy or whatever.
Agent,
somebody like that. I don't think he is a large individual. I'll say that. But did you see the recent video of him working out? I think it was with the Big Three or something. But he had like full head of hair, and I mean, he's like knocking down jumpers and stuff. It made me think about like these guys are so skilled. For a guy who was just a hustle guy, work hard guy, there's still some skill to them as well. Sorry, I know it got off on a tangent there, but I'll never forget he was having some interesting conversations in that elevator. So
yeah, it was funny because I didn't even notice it was Birdman at first. And then I looked, and it was just, I mean, of course, he's the only person who looks like him. So it was like, yeah, that is Birdman.
All right, you're getting some love, Wes. Great question. I got to get out of the comments now because I can't cheat anymore, even though you guys didn't help me out. So we'll keep the game. Is there any way I can come back? Like, how can we distort the game so I have a chance here? We only have like 3 minutes left in the episode.
If you get 4 in a row, because there are exactly 4 left, you could do it. You could pull it off.
Yeah, but he has to miss all of them. Okay, whatever. Let's go. We got
he would, but still.
All right, here we go.
So Omari, you first. Game. Next one here. This one. this one's kind of an obscure one, at least I thought. But the Pistons as a team.
The last one wasn't obscure enough.
No, that one all the fans knew.
Except for the ones watching.
The Pistons
right now.
as a team played more minutes in 2021-2022 than they did last season. Sheed or Sham.
They played more minutes in 2021-22. I'm gonna go. No, Sham. I'm gonna go Sham.
I have to go Sheed. Like, I feel like I have no choice at this point. So
it was Sham.
Okay.
They must have played more overtime. So they played 25 more last year than that prior season. So it must have just been more overtime games or something.
My mind immediately went, I think they went into triple OT with the Spurs. Like, it was like the last game before All-Star Weekend or something like that. I just remember I was just like, I don't. Why did that game go into 3 OTs? Like, that game did not need 3 overtimes. I just remembered that, and I was like, that alone might have been the difference because
how do you remember this stuff? You don't even know what day of the week it is right now. But I Googled
it's a selective memory. I remember stuff that matters. The day of the week doesn't matter in the grand scheme, but stuff like that matters to my job.
I'll remember that whenever you don't. February 10th, 2023, Spurs 131, Pistons 138. Definitely some sort of overtime game. Yeah, so I think it was 2 overtimes. So
it was 2. Okay. Anyway, I just remember being frustrated about some of the overtimes last year, and 2 years ago I didn't remember that as much. So that was more of a vibes answer there.
Whatever. Next question.
All right. Well, he's officially won the game, but we'll get through the rest.
Yeah.
Bryce, this one's for you. Monte Morris has never had an offensive rating lower than 120 in his career.
Sheed. Just because I want it to be true.
I feel like he had a year that was like 119 or 118. I'm going to go Sham.
Guaranteed he had a year where it was 119.8. Guaranteed.
It's actually 118. It is Sham.
That's right.
He still nailed that.
I'm running the table today. Let's go.
You need to go back to Vegas, bro.
Let's go. I do.
All right. Put me out of my misery with the next 2 so I can embarrass myself a little more.
That was impressive. All right, Omari.
So,
Sheet or sham, the last time Joe Harris shot less than 40% from three was 7 years ago. 7 seasons ago.
she
I thought it was Sheed too. I guess the game's over anyway, so I'll just stick with my original answer. I'll say Sheed.
Yeah, it was Sheed. It was 2016, and it was 38.5%.
I just looked
That
at
was
his
his under
stats last
40
week.
season.
It's crazy. That's what I'm saying. Like, I know we've talked about it. We don't have to get into it again, but I find it hard to believe that this dude ain't going to come in and knock down shots at a high rate for the Pistons. And I find it hard to believe that's not something that they could use, at least in some way at some time. So
Yeah, even in a down year last year, he shot like 42, 43%. I mean, a guy who shoots that well, and he's had a whole offseason to get himself back right. I mean, he could surprise people next year. Like, you look at the roster construction, and it's like, okay, maybe he doesn't. If he doesn't crack the rotation, it's not like the worst thing. But a player who can shoot like him, like, he's going to force the issue some nights.
absolutely. All right, we got one more, Wes.
Yes, sir. Last one. Who did I ask that last one to?
Me, so I think it's
Bryce. This one's going to
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Sheet or sham, Marcus Sasser averaged more steals per game his junior year, not last year, his junior year, than Asar Thompson did last year.
Sham.
Just gonna go sheet. I don't know if I'm gonna go however many questions it is. I want to go perfect, but I have to pick the opposite of Bryce. So I'm just gonna go sheet.
It was sham.
Okay.
Yes.
All
right.
Yes.
All right.
It was close though. So
Yes.
Sasser that year was 2.2, Asar last year 2.4.
Yeah, like
And I was surprised at how close it was.
yeah, like Asar's steal numbers were just like crazy last year. So I was like, Sasser to do that in college would just be like insane. So my gut said Sham, but my desire to pick the opposite of Bryce was shoot. So.
You were that close to running the table.
Yeah,
That
you
close.
should have stayed with it. All right,
close.
man.
Didn't even need the chat.
Didn't even need to chat.
You didn't even use it. We'll have to open the YouTube stream the next time we do that, because those come in a little faster. Yeah. And we're here on StreamYard. We're just a little bit lagged as those come in. But we appreciate, hopefully you guys had fun with that. Wes, glad we finally got you on here. Obviously, we'll do this some more over the rest of the summer. If you guys haven't been, Wes and Jack Kelly doing big things on the DBB Live, Detroit Bad Boys Live, YouTube, talking Pistons, usually every Thursday. Sometimes the schedule changes a little bit, but tune in with those guys. Wes, thank you, man. You guys have no idea what this man does for Omari and I and keep the Pistons Pulse going.
Wes is the GOAT, and we're going to have him. We're like peak offseason now, so we're going to devise more ways to bring Wes into the fold over the next 2 weeks. I promise you it will happen. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We got a ton of great trade ideas today, so thank you again to everybody who sent one. I believe I am 6-0, 6-2 in Sheet or Sham now. Not every day you could get 2 dubs, so today's doubleheader got both, so I'm very happy about that. Shout out to my 7th grade science bowl teacher. I've been pretty good at trivia ever since. Mr. Evans, shout out to you. I thank you for today's wins.
Get to the outro.
And with that, I will close this out. Big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our executive producer, Anjanette Delgado, and our sports editor, Kirkland Crawford. And big shout out to Wes as always. We'll talk to you all next week.